and also in cloud architecture. And today, this is not a webinar. This is not a kind of technology webinar or any process or framework webinar, because I'm sure all of you are more knowledgeable than me in Scrum, Agile, have implemented Agile in your organization, etc. So please don't take this webinar as something to as a course or something. It's a 40-45 minutes discussion on my experiences, on how I improved or how I helped improve my team in Scrum, added more value in terms of product enrichment, product envisioning, and flow of the product requirement right from the business users to the technical teams, to the Scrum team. So this is my experience, and I would like to thank, or I would like to express my gratitude towards the Scrum with Kanban guide from scrum.org, which was the starting point for me, because we were not in a scenario to implement Kanban. We had already started with Scrum, and it took a lot of effort to coach teams into Scrum, into believing the Scrum way of working, into the culture change, etc. So though getting started with Kanban, according to me, is a bit easier, but since we already invested a lot of effort, we found that Kanban can be integrated very seamlessly with Scrum, and the values that Kanban gives, along with the usual Scrum framework, we at least found it immense. So I'm here to share this with you. So a short point on the logistics side. So I'll request everyone to be on mute, please, because though we want this webinar to be interactive, but when after just going through a few slides and sharing the details, I'm getting some there's some question like
Yeah,
Kanban
so
a challenge.
Amit, let's do it this way. You can continue. We'll have some logical break in between, and where we will
Sure.
be taking all the questions.
Sure. So yeah, on the similar line, we after going through the
Everyone, you
slides.
can put on your question on the chat window. So whenever we'll be having a logical break, primarily you can actually complete that, and then finally we have all the question answers.
Yeah, definitely. So so that's one. So please stay on mute, and you can ask any questions at any point of time, and we'll discuss at the end of the session. And second is that, again, I am reiterating, please don't take this as a as a training session or something, because I'm sure that a mutual discussion would be more beneficial in my understanding of Kanban. So I'll just begin, and
Yes,
I'm
thank you,
sure you can.
Amit. We so far have 27 candidates over here, and in our live YouTube, we have 12 members there.
Wow, that's good. I mean, given that this is, I mean, I do a very less number of webinars. Thank to Niladri who gave me this opportunity. So we'll begin with a very short introduction, just to make myself familiar with you guys. So I am a fanatic believer in Agile. I worked. I mean, luckily I got to work with Agile in one of the first projects in my when I started as a .NET developer, and I was part of the Scrum team in Citibank, where they were going through agile transformation of their own. So I was lucky in that respect. And now I have become quite a fanatic believer. I can argue with anyone on agile who says it doesn't work at some scenarios. So I don't know that's good or bad, but I am one. I am by my day-to-day activity, I'm a DevOps practitioner. I take care of continuous integration, deployment, and containerization, and all these things in cloud and on-premise for various clients that I work for. I have grown of late. I've grown a deep interest in deep learning, especially in generative algorithms, where you generate data instead of consuming data, generate artificial data, that is. And I'm a fan of detective fiction. I like Agatha Christie. So that's uh, that's a bit about me. And I'll share you my LinkedIn link if you can. I mean, and I'll be very happy if we join. So I'll begin this discussion or this webinar with something called culture hacking. I don't know whether you have heard about it. My experience, or I had heard about it quite late. I had heard about the first time I heard about it was 2018, where we got a very good agile coach in the in my practice, or in my in with the client that I was working with. And he firmly believed that agile transformation is all about culture transformation. uh, and culture comes first, and everything else, frameworks, process, adaptations, tools, etc., comes at the very, I mean, all are of less priority than culture. So from then on, I deeply got interested in culture hacking, and I found that the tools and techniques that are used for culture hacking greatly improves the perception of agile in the teams, and makes teams more self-reliant, helps a team to believe firmly in agile, which is more important than to first you have to believe, and then only you can embrace. So that's very important. So what is culture hacking? Culture hacking is basically uh, hacking into different cultures. Doesn't only mean that team members will come from different countries, then only you can apply this. No, it means everyone comes. It means that you agree and you respect the fact that everyone comes from a different background, with a different mindset, with a different history, different technical background, different business background, and you have to hack their mindsets, to change their mindset, to transform their mindsets into agile. And by hack, I mean, it means taking some shortcuts, taking some methodologies, using some tools, using some actions, coaching them into believing in agile. So like I am sure almost all of you have faced problems, like I'll not say problems, but opportunities to coach people who are very senior folks, and who come from I mean, primarily from waterfall background, have been working on government projects, have been working on legacy architectures, legacy systems, and when they come into a agile shop, I mean, it takes a lot more than tools, processes, frameworks, and trainings to make them believe in the power of agile, and that's where culture hacking comes into play. So why am I doing this? Because my experience with Scrum and Kanban, of introducing Kanban to Scrum teams, goes deep rooted in culture hacking. So when I wanted to transform the client's mindset primarily, because I know that a team, a self-organized team, or a team which is going to be self-organized at some point of time, will eventually go into agile, will go into Scrum, will start believing on Scrum, and will act as a self-organizing team. But more, the challenge which I faced in my journey was to change the mindset of the client, change the mindset of client organization into believing in agile, and giving the requirements, or the flowing the requirements from the client organization to different vendor organizations, and then adapting those requirements. So I started this concept of hacking the culture, to actually make them believe in the world of Scrum. How? I'll come in the next slides. So this definition is like patterns of believing, feeling, and thinking is all about the culture. It doesn't not only shapes the company, but it also shapes on the individual, from the individual personalities to the team as a whole. So to disrupt anything, to make people believe in agile, or to do an agile transformation, the first thing is, according to me, is hacking the culture, and seeing, and getting a feel that when the culture changes, slowly people will adapt, because what we need to do is shift from thinking that is complicated to complex. So here I'll give a brief introduction that what to hack. Like basically, when I'm saying culture hacking, what is there to hack? So the main thing that is to hack is to do things, or is to play games. I mean, I don't know. I mean, do what your coaching, whatever your coaching comprises of, to make people believe on the power of complexity. Because agile projects, and I mean, by far large software projects, are about human beings. They are not about tools. They are not about technology. Yes, those play a major role in that, but the ingredient of a software project is human being. They are not robots, or they are not machinery. So uh, kind of a trade floor or a shop floor model is not suited for software project. And we have to have the mindset that complexity is everything. Complexity means where predictability is low, where you cannot predict. So complexity is telling us that not everything is as predictable as Newton's apple falling from the tree. So that's what agile coaches or people who are change agents or in their organization needs to believe, that software projects are complex adaptive systems, not complicated systems, but complex systems. So this is the first thing that you need to hack, to make people believe that they are working in a complex environment. When I say people, I would mean mostly the people who are decision makers, because again, hacking a team is very easy. I mean, according to me, much easier than hacking the client organization or the organization which gives the requirement to these teams. Okay, so I mean, like the upstream, if I use the word upstream, the upstream teams, hacking the upstream teams are most difficult. So the first thing that I think we need to hack is making them believe on complexity rather than complicatedness, and making them believe that predictability is not the solution. Predictability will never come, and predictability is a, I mean, to have a idea of predictability or notion of predictability after some point of time, achieving predictability is nothing but, I mean, according to me, a goose's chase and nothing else. So, how does complexity for thinking for teams happen? We need to or at least I understood from my journey of coaching teams that teams are not ships that we can steer. They are not they are not a solid thing that we can steer and take them into different directions or the directions that I want to. We have to predict, we have to ensure that we believe that they are ecosystems like the weather. They are predictable at some times, but a small minute change in them can make them unpredictable. So here is the first point which I want to make believe, and I would say the first discussion point of this evening is that complexity thinking uh, is important, and complexity thinking is something which means that predictability is good but not achievable. Okay, so with this thought in mind, that complexity thinking is essential, and we need to do whatever we can to imbibe complexity thinking in our teams, in our peers, and in the upstream teams, if I may call so. With this thought in mind, let us see why at all I needed for my project or for my program, I needed I needed Kanban when my team was already working in Scrum. The first, uh, so before that, let us just have a very quick approach to a very quick recap of Scrum, and I'm sure that you all are like champs of Scrum. So I would not take much time, or I would not take much time into reiterating what you already know. So Scrum is basically a framework to develop complex products in complex adaptive environments. So it not only applies for software, but it applies in general for any whenever we are designing or making any product, or I would say even services. So, and it was developed by Ken Squareward and Jeff Sutherland, and obviously the only guide I would say of Scrum is the guide that is available in scrum.org. Though there are like multiple Scrum guides available now, which is not the topic of discussion. So we have a product backlog, that is the owner of which is the product owner, of course. He is the sole owner who is responsible and accountable for the product backlog, though the grooming of the product backlog is a collaborative task by the product owner and the team. And the product owner may get inputs from the product backlog from all over the organization, even for people external of the organization, with his customers, with his customers, anything. But he is the owner of it. He's the sole owner of it, and he lives with the product backlog. He's the only person answerable for the product backlog, and the person who is answerable for getting the value out of the product backlog. So in a sprint planning session, the subset of the product backlog, which is much more elaborated and much more refined, I would say, is selected. And there are various ways of selecting and prioritizing elements from product backlog, which is again not the topic of today's discussion. And a sprint backlog is formed. So the team chooses the product along with the help of the product owner, because he knows the best that which are the items that the team has to deliver next, so that the MVP that is getting built gets the maximum business value. And on choosing when the sprint planning session is over, when the sprint backlog is, we have a concrete sprint backlog to start with. We start our sprint, which is of 2 to 4 weeks duration and performed by 5 to 9 members. There may be a little less, little more, but that's the number we usually go for. Every 24 hours, we have a daily Scrum meeting where the team gathers together and discusses questions like what went well today, what they had done yesterday. Sorry, what they had done yesterday, what they are doing today, and if there are any impediments that needs to be resolved. The Scrum Master is the process coach for this entire thing, and he works with the team. He coaches the team. He guides the team to uh, on imbibing the Scrum values, on getting in with proper guidance to get the maximum benefit out of the Scrum artifacts like the product backlog, sprint backlog, and the potentially shippable in product increment. And after the sprint is over, at the end of the sprint, we have a sprint review meeting where sprint review, it's a kind of a walking meeting where not only the demos are shown, but uh, a discussion on the increment is done to see where we stand and what is acceptable, what is not. And it's a time for the team along with the product owner to basically inspect and adapt. And then the team again goes for a retrospective to discuss what went good in the sprint, what went bad, and uh, what things can be improved. And even the definition of done, definition of ready, all these things get reiterated and discussed in the retrospective. So in this is a nutshell of the Scrum, of what Scrum is. I'll not waste much time into this. So so what happens, at least what happened in my project was that the developers were quite, or the I would say the Scrum team members were quite happy with Scrum, happy with how things are going. I don't believe in velocity. Neither I want my team to believe in velocity. Because after all, sizing, estimation, and velocity are all relative items. But the team was gathering more and more velocity, burning down stories, getting good benefits of the sprint review, doing great retrospectives, etc. But the what happened was that since in the next slide you will see, since our project was a bit different from the normal one, like we were not into a pure development project, but I was coaching a team or teams, individual Scrum teams, who were actually responsible for creating a predictive solution for one of our client. And when I say predictive solution, it means a solution that had input as a huge historical data set as input, like a historical data set of like almost 25 years of data as input, some streaming data as input, and they were churning out machine learning algorithms and predictive algorithms to actually show the client the value of that data, to show the client that they can make much better decisions with that particular data. So they were mainly divided into three major parts. One was the prediction teams, which were actually predicting something out of the data, showing the client predictive capabilities of the data using machine learning, deep learning, etc. One part was working with streaming data. Streaming data means continuous flow of data from IoT devices, IoT sensors, etc., and showing clients that without human intervention, it's much more easier to make decisions and absorb failure, mitigate risks of various mechanical devices. Our client was basically into power generation, etc., thermal power generation, and it's much easier to make those decisions. based on streaming data. And the third team was creating chatbots. So chatbots are, as you know, like software agents or automated agents which chats with the client and kind of is the first level interface. I think you have all seen chatbots in various websites, first level interface with the client. So this was more or less the team. And though the teams were happy and they were adapting Scrum well, but I had a difficult time to convince my client and my leadership on what is the actual value that they are delivering. Value in terms of not only in terms of like burning down the stories, but value in terms of the team being self-organized, the team actually improving themselves, because both the companies were spending a ton of money on those teams, and data science teams are expensive. So um, so I had quite a difficult time in showing them that the team is getting improved, the team is improving themselves, the team is actually delivering some value, the team is actually realizing the flow of value from requirement to development. Because as you know, uh, productionizing something, a predictive analytics algorithm or machine learning algorithm into production doesn't really mean that you will get the value soon, like whenever you release you'll get the value. That's not that. It takes time because the algorithm has to mature itself. So that was the thing. Like it was like we have Scrum, it's working good, but it's not like it's a hammer and nail problem, that and not everything needs the hammer, right? So Scrum cannot solve all the things. It's very powerful, but to make others believe in Scrum I needed something else. So before I go to the next slide, when I realized that I needed something else, I started experimenting with a lot of things. I started inventing new metrics, which was like a disastrous decision from my side. We started discussing, and some of the agile coach suggested reliability metrics, some suggested some different metrics to make the client believe that okay, this is the value that the team commitment metrics, like how much story points the team is committing and how much they're burning down. So that created that created kind of a bad feeling among teams, because again story points are relative and you cannot have a reliability metrics on story point or a commitment metrics on story point. At least we found that is not working. So we needed something else. So that was our main problem statement: how to make people believe in the power of agile. Uh, Not only the teams, but how to make the entire business organization believe on the power of Scrum, and how to make the teams obviously improve themselves day by day, and how to let them know that they are improving. How do I let them make them feel that they are improving? So that was the thing that was our challenge. So this was like kind of our project. I had like it's a very high level view of what we were doing. So the problem framing part, or understanding the problem from a business perspective, was mainly the job of our various product owners, and there was a chief product owner among them, and they were kind of the owners of the vision of the project, of the entire program. They actually help the team collect the data, make the data flow. I mean, see the actual data that is coming. The team together understands the data, visualize the data, cleans the data, and then the modeling happens. And these are various tools. I would say these are various kind of, you would say, a very high level features or requirements. I'll not say these are epics, but these are very high level, even rate them epics, that are coming for each of these lanes. So this is more or less the platform that we were designing. And you would see that the blue ones are, I mean, cannot be actually a part of a DevOps environment. Okay, so there are some things that needs human intelligence, data, deep statistical knowledge, etc., and they cannot be like very much a part of a DevOps environment, so that we can solve our problem with by delivering faster and by delivering in shorter cycles. So that was not happening. So we had classified our pains into three major, I would say, pain area or impediment, if we call. One is the pain of backlog, that how do we manage the backlog elements flowing from here to here to here to here to here in all the lanes, as you see, if I call them lanes. How do we ensure that we have enough analysis of story ready for development? Because in a typical data science project, you don't have enough data to start with for the first thing. You don't know what data to take, which data will be important for predicting the future. You don't know that. If I ask you to predict tomorrow's weather, you would not be able to tell me whether today's pollution and today's rainfall are the most important feature. You will not be able to say for sure. You need more data to say that, right? So that was another problem. How do we avoid preparing and analyzing too many stories to work on? Like sometimes developer had too many stories, the Scrum teams had too many stories, and even the product owners of those teams just didn't know which story, which data, which story would actually.
Hello. Hello. I think there is some disturbance.
I think we lost him.
Okay, let me just quickly call him. What happened?
Second was the bottlenecks. We were not able to visualize the bottlenecks.
I think in between, Amit, we lost you for a few moments.
Okay, am I clear now?
Yes.
Am I audible now?
Yes.
Okay, so was I audible in this slide, or should I repeat this?
Yeah, I think it's okay. You can continue.
Okay, so the second impediment that we had was about visualizing the bottlenecks, because this kind of team that are like that has multiple technologies, that are working in multiple technologies, doesn't have it's very difficult to actually visualize bottlenecks of those teams, because data scientists, they are a combination. These teams are a heterogeneous combination of data engineers, data scientists, cloud architects, developers, uh, visualization engineers, etc. So it's very difficult to see where the exact bottleneck is, because it's kind of I would say a heterogeneous data mess. This kind of projects are, and there's a lot of task switching. So like a visualization engineer, when working with a story, will run to the data scientist and data engineer like million times a day. So there's a lot of task switching that goes on, and it has to happen. I mean, we cannot just stop it, because that's the way things are. A visualization engineer cannot be a statistics expert, or a statistics expert cannot be a, it's very difficult for him to work on cloud tools, for example. So task switching will happen. So this was another challenge. The third challenge was obviously technology, because data science, as you know, data science, data engineering, it's a boom in the market now, but there are very few qualified people who actually knows the trade, and there's a lot to discover in this field. There's a lot of interfacing between academics, pure academics, and industry. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge to successfully productionize and make into production a good data science solution, a good predictive solution along with visualization. And believe me, like the success rate of a good data science project in production is very low as of now, because of this heterogeneous mixture, how business sees that, how business will use the predictive solution, etc., which I call the ecosystem dynamics. Niladri, is it okay now? Am I audible? Just checking.
Yes, it's okay. You can continue, please.
Okay, thanks. So these were our main challenges, along with the fact which I told you was how to make people of our organization and the client organization believe uh, that whatever they are doing, the value will be realizable. The teams will self-organize, the teams will slowly self-improve, and continual improvement will be there every minute and every second. So how and also to make the team themselves believe that all these things will happen. How to do that, along with these three impediments. So those were our main challenges. So we started exploring, as I told, various options like uh, inventing, I would say, I mean, with a lot of sarcasm on myself, inventing new metrics, even trying to invent new processes, etc. Like not processes outside our Scrum boundary, etc., which was obviously not working well. So we decided to try Kanban. We decided to not to go into full-fledged Kanban because our teams were already doing Scrum, but we decided to go for some of the Kanban, use Kanban as a strategy, which is most important point which I wanted to mention here. Use Kanban as a strategy along with Scrum. So I got a question from one of the before I started my session, that is Kanban something Chinese? No, Kanban is not something Chinese. It's a Japanese. This is Japanese letter actually, and it means visual card. Kanban means visual card. So it means signal to start work. Kanban is that simple. It means a signal where you should start work, or you should pull work yourself. So that's what Kanban is. But I would not go deep into the philosophy of Kanban. We used Kanban as a strategy, not as a framework, not as a methodology, but we started using Kanban as a strategy. So what we did first was visualize the workflow. So we had multiple Scrum teams, that I told you, and each of the teams had different workflows, okay, of working, right, of various methods of working, I would say. And this workflow did not only consist of the team, like this workflow was not only for the team, for the Scrum team only, but this workflow started much beyond the Scrum team. Like it started from the client organization, and it involved a lot of chief product owner, different product owners, different business managers, even marketing specialists, salespeople of them, client, etc. A lot of people who were involved in this, were involved while the requirement was getting created, the requirement or the product vision was getting defined. Okay, so the workflow started from then on. So the first point which we did was to make sure that they are involved actively in the workflow as well. Okay, so we defined an end-to-end workflow for this entire organization. For each of the Scrum teams, we defined an entire workflow, which not only consists of the team's definition of workflow, but also their entire business organization's workflow. How, right from where the story is flowing, when the requirement is being generated. So this entire workflow was owned by the Scrum team, and the development workflow, that is starting from, say, sprint planning to where we are actually releasing the product into a staging environment as a potentially shippable increment. So this particular part of the workflow was owned by the development team. So the entire workflow, the entire one owned by the full Scrum team, and the part of it or a subset of it owned by the development team. And there were sessions where we as agile coaches did numerous value stream mappings, and I used house of quality, QFDs, etc., quality function diagrams, house of quality, then value stream mapping, etc., to actually make the team visualize the workflow and set a fixed workflow for them. It is we acknowledged and we all trusted ourselves that this workflow will change, obviously, but it will only change when we have a retrospective, and we have a proper retrospective, and we have proper reasons to change it. So we first fixed on a definition of workflow, but we also fixed our mindset that it may change. So what does that workflow contain? The workflow contained the requirement flow, or I would say the flow of value from the requirement organization to the development team to it getting released. So this flow of value was kind of diagrammatically represented in the workflow, and as I told you, we did various value stream mappings to optimize that workflow. The workflow also contained parts of inspect, adapt. The workflow represented definition of done. The workflow represented definition of ready, etc. Everything. So the first point was the Scrum team visualized their individual workflows. And I mean, the project is like now going on again, and we are making sure that each of these workflows become similar to each other as the time passes, so that there is a uniformity in work. So again, like kind of making it predictable when it cannot be predictable. So doing your best to make to stay in that in this world. So the first was visualization of the workflow. The second was you select a work in progress limit for each of the part of the workflow, for each of the lanes of the workflow. Again, I'm sure if you have seen Kanban boards, you know what lanes are. Lanes are basically, you can say, a group of individual individual units of work or something like that. Like development can be a lane, testing can be a lane, etc. And each of these lanes we used, I mean, initially we used a developer's consciousness to basically set the limit. The team discussed and they came up with a limit. Then slowly we improved and optimized the limit. It's a continuous process to optimize the limit based on Little's law, etc. And the team decided on the work in progress limit. I personally have seen as time progresses, I personally have seen that the efficiency will increase and bottleneck will decrease if we can map the workflow and we can fix the limit. We fix means it's not that we will not change, but we optimize the limit. Or by optimization, I don't mean increasing the limit. It can be as well decreasing the limit, decreasing the work in progress limit. Like for example, we have made a rule to decrease the limit 1 point for each of the lanes wherever there is a change in a team member. So this is one of our rules which we have set as a team, and as their agile coach, I respect their decision. Uh, so that when a team member comes, each of the other team members have a little bit of time to spend with him to get him acclimatized with the Scrum culture, with the agile culture, with culture as a whole, and then again increase the limit in the maybe in the next sprint, and so on. It is absolutely okay with if the product owner wants to break the work in progress limit and the team respects this decision, but it should not be a recurrence in all the sprints. Okay, it can be like a very urgent thing to do, and obviously not in between the sprints, not when a sprint is going on. So that should be a working agreement with the product owner. The third was management of work in progress. So this was the most crucial stage where actually the coaching and the various, I would say the various facilitations games starts has a tremendous impact on the team. Because when we have set the workflow, when we have defined the work in progress limits for each of the lanes of the workflow, then the active management of work in progress has to be done. And when I say work in progress, what we did was when we had a low priority work on, means that like a story that is like that was picked up by the team, but which we know has a risk associated with it, that there is a technical dependency or something, some technical challenges associated with the story. We took time, or in based on our work in progress limit, we took time to do spikes or to do short analysis of the story, groom it further, even when it is in our sprint backlog. And if we feel that a lot more time is needed, we stop working on that story, keep it in the lane and move ahead. Production capability, we obviously we had introduced huge tool automation. We have tried to automate as much as possible our work through DevOps pipeline, through automation testing, etc., refactoring the code, etc. But we focus more on personal development. We recognize that we made a team agreement, made a program. I mean, it's at a program level, we made an agreement that innovation is not something to be hacked. It's a continuous process. We have to respect that. It's not a 2 days process of like the hackathon culture that has spread, like you sit 2 days and make some new product. It doesn't work like that. It has to be a part of all your work, and the teams and the product owners are okay if the work in progress limit is decreased because the team feels they need more time to work on which I called innovation tasks in this particular sprint. And anything which will create work on downstream, we avoid doing that. So we avoid uh, keeping work pending that will be done downstream. So we try to complete work as much as possible upstream of the workflow. To do this, to do the active management of workflow, we do a lot of swarming. So I remember a time when I started my career. I was a .NET developer, and I was not aware of even before my first project started in Agile, like during the time of training and we were doing some POCs, etc. We used to gather together in someone's desk, and we used to, I didn't even knew the word swarming then. We used to swarm and we used to solve some problems. And even before that, the days of our college when we used to group study, then I came to realize that this is swarming. This is how not only human beings but animals also gather their intelligence. It's the collective behavior that emerges from a group of social people, maybe insects, animals, human beings, etc. So our team slowly recognized that. We made the product owners and our client organization recognize swarming. We heavily depend on swarming now because the kind of project we do, data science and data engineering projects, cannot be done. It's like almost impossible for a person to be like cross skilled in that. It's almost impossible. For a person to know data science, data engineering, cloud technologies, visualization, and user interface, it's impossible. So we recognize the power of swarming. To work in a user story, usually, like if you see 3 or 4 guys all huddled up in one computer, that's absolutely okay. If they need other laptops or 2 laptops huddled all together, that's also absolutely okay. So to recognize that through flexibility, robustness, and self-organization is important. At least it worked nicely for us. And the fourth, as I already had pointed out, was inspecting and adapting the team's definition of workflow. So it's not that we made a workflow and we stopped making it again. No, we carry out value stream mappings parallelly to a sprint, where as a coach, I observe the team, I observe the workflow, I observe the work in progress limit, how the team is adapting to that. I silently make my observations, but I don't interfere with their work in between sprint. It at retrospection, if I'm given a chance and if the team agrees, then I give my observations and the team is happy to inspect and adapt the workflow. So the product owners again have a heavy hand impact on inspecting and adapting the workflow, but they are not the decision takers. They can add to the workflow, they can edit the workflow, but the team as a collective organism has to decide on the workflow. So this is kind of the links. I have avoided using, I've taken this image from Henrik's book. I've avoided using any kind of tools. We are using Jira for this though, but I've avoided any kind of tool screenshots. Metrics, we started publishing these 4 metrics along with our usual burn down charts and burn up charts. But again, metrics are not so important as embracing agility is. But I'll go through quickly the metrics that made our business, our leadership, and the team also to believe on what they are doing is actually improving them. So the work in progress limit, obviously, if they're optimizing, I'm not saying increasing the work in progress limit. If they're optimizing the work in progress limit, and the work in progress limit is dynamically reflecting what the current situation of the project is, then it's a very good sign. Work item age, this is a lagging metrics, like lagging indicator, and any decrease in work item age over the history of like 2, 3, 4 sprints is usually a good indicator. Cycle time, again, decreasing the cycle time. It's basically the time measured from start to finish. It's the time taken to complete a work item. So cycle time is again a lagging indicator, and it actually translates into a probabilistic measure of the team. Like whenever the team is starting something new, based on the historical cycle time, they can at least give a rough idea when they can finish it. So it's a kind of it has a kind of a probabilistic meaning attached to it, which helps the team to make their work a little more predictable. And throughput we use heavily in sprint planning, because it's actually is the number of units that are completed per unit time, say like number of story points that I can complete at every 2 sprints or every 3 sprints, although respecting the fact that the story point or relative size is so we use heavily this in sprint planning, we use heavily in capacity planning. So at least we have a transparent metrics to deal with some things that were not quite so transparent before. So it increased our transparency, and adapting Kanban, as I said, as a strategy, increased our transparency and helped us to inspect and adapt more, especially on this kind of like risk based projects where the risk is too high because of high technological risk and almost complete unknown frontier of data. So before going to the next slide, I would open the question answer session now. So Niladri, if you can.
Yeah, so there were a couple of questions we have, not much from YouTube side, but here we have a couple of questions. So Rajendra asked at 9:51 our time, why are we taking a lot more about culture and etc. What's getting to then getting to the actual topic? Maybe we actually talked about something else. So Amit, you will be the right person to talk about this one.
Yeah, sure. So Rajendra, that's quite an interesting question. Yes, I indeed talk.
No,
Yeah, please.
so I think my question was more about, I mean, in this webinar, what I was looking was how exactly you tried using Kanban in Scrum is what I wanted to learn. Understand about the Kanban principles, like, what are the 6 principles which we'll be using. I know, like, you spoke about your use case and, like, your impediments and things like that. So maybe a deeper level into, like, how exactly you use, like, have you created a Scrum board or a Kanban board? Like, how exactly were you, like, getting those metrics? That's exactly what I wanted to learn, not like some of these principles we do actually use, like the WIP limit and other things. But coming to my initial question, yeah, I think I thought it was going in a different direction for 10 to 15 minutes of you're talking about culture, you're talking about changing and things like that, rather than coming to the actual topic.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, nice observation. Yeah, I talked about culture because see, our keeping everything aside, keeping the technology risk, etc., platform risk, business risk, everything aside, what mainly was that Kanban, when we used Kanban with Scrum, due to those 4 metrics and due to those 3 principles of visualizing the workflow in a Scrum, at a Scrum context, maintaining work in progress limit at a Scrum context, and actively managing the work items, made us helped us to get through the culture of adoption more, because we were at a loss that how to make our client organization believe that whatever the teams are doing, they need to spend more time on that. They need to be a little more patient on the teams, so that the teams get going on agile mode, because this particular kind of projects are very risky. It involves a huge amount of money, and the return on investments are not that.
So you're saying like when you when you used Kanban with Scrum, you were able to change the culture or the mindset, like whatever you mentioned about that hacking mindset of the organization.
We were able to hack the mindset in terms that we were able to show more clarity in terms of metrics. Like when I show a client only burn down chart, it may not help him to realize that, okay, I'm paying like thousands of dollars for every sprint and I'm not getting anything realizable, because he will not get anything realizable. It's a data science project. He has to wait for more data to flow in to get the value of that. So how to make him believe that, okay, not only this, we are decreasing the cycle time, we are increasing the throughput, and by this we are delivering more of value into your production. So this is how we kind of try to hack the mindset into believing in agile culture.
Okay, I got one question for you. So how are you trying to calculate the cycle time and throughput on a Scrum board? Because Scrum board, like, if you're starting again, you're doing your velocity, your story points and things like that, right? In Kanban, it's not, there are no story points, concept of story points. But does any of these tools allow you to calculate automatically?
Yeah,
even though you're using the Scrum board?
Yeah, I have. I don't want to go deep into a tool discussion, but I'll give you a quick answer. We use Jira and we use Scrum board. We don't use a Kanban board. We estimate stories through story points. But what we do is, whenever a story is picked up by by the Scrum team for development, when the definition of ready is complete, we have a field in a custom field in Jira, which actually whenever it is picked up, it actually automatically sets today's date. Like if today it is picked up, it sets today's date into one of the date field of the story. We keep it hidden from the developers.
Gotcha. So I think it's just like something custom which you guys did. It's not like something which is built into the tool. Of course,
No.
you went and you created your custom field.
We kind of tweak the tool and with a simple JavaScript. Yeah.
Okay. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. All right. Thank you.
Okay, we have one more question from Shalok Mohanty at 9:53. The question is, it's a ongoing process on the group of sprint, or is it correct? Sprint means to complete a task in iteration in a particular time, right? That's the question. So again, Shalok, you can give some details on the questions if you have, or Amit, if you understood it, you can answer it.
It's an ongoing process on the group of sprints.
It's an ongoing process on the group of sprints. Is it
according
correct?
to if I answer your question, Shlok, correctly, the way we use Kanban in Scrum is we see Kanban as a strategy to improve Scrum. Yeah, it is all through all the sprints. The principles which I described remains constant through all the sprints. And no, sprint doesn't mean to complete a task in iterations in a particular time. It doesn't mean that. Sprint is a time box, which means a definite amount of time in which the teams choose some stories to do, and at the end of which they show what they have done, and they discuss among themselves on how they have done it or what they can do to further improve it. So that's what I understand by sprint. So
all right. Yeah, so let's go with the next question, what we have from Brenda Peterson. What was the composition of your teams? Was it horizontal or vertical?
Yeah, good question. Our team was mainly comprised of several horizontals. So it had data scientists, engineers, and cloud architects, UI designers, UX people, business analysts, etc. So they were horizontals.
All right, we'll go to the next question from Vivek Vora. Is it a Scrumban?
I would not call it a Scrumban, because Scrumban is when you implement the entire philosophy of Kanban into Scrum. When we mix both together, it's more of how we used Kanban, some Kanban principles, some selective Kanban principles, and put them in Scrum, keeping everything of Scrum constant. Nothing of Scrum changes, but some principles of Kanban superimposed on Scrum to actually get more value from it. So I would not call it Scrumman.
All right.
Yeah.
The next question we have from Shalok Mohanty. This was particular on that context when it was asked at 10:09 p.m. Okay, sir, means managing the work. So I'm not sure what exactly you were discussing on that particular discussion context. This question came up, but I'm not able to correlate. Shalok, if you are listening, can you please ask what exactly the context was? Okay, we'll go to, I think Shalok is not here anymore. So we'll go to the next question that was from Debanja. Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question? So,
yes, please.
So I think Amit, so you're saying like you are using Scrum and nothing has changed. So you're having your sprints and things like that, and then you're using these Kanban principles. So, but at the same time, I was listening in one of your presentations where you say you don't believe in velocity and things like that. So you're no longer using velocity or concepts of those, and you're using.
Yeah, good question, Rajendra. So I didn't say like I don't believe in velocity. I think I said that I don't believe in teams getting judged by velocity.
Right. Yeah. I mean, of course, that's relative. That's understandable. So my question was more in those lines, like, when you're, so what I'm understanding with what you have done with your work is you're following Scrum, and you haven't changed anything with what you're doing with Scrum. What you're trying to do is you added some of these Kanban additional principles to your Scrum, like calculating the cycle time or lead time, WIP limits, and like swarming and other techniques. Like you can added those, and that's what you're trying to enhance Scrum. Is what I'm getting from your use case. Is that right?
Absolutely. I
Okay.
mean, that's absolutely bang on point. Yeah.
Okay, the next question we have from Debanjan Sengupta, who is asking, how do you interpret the work in progress limit as a metric over a period of time? How do you gain insights?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So so we start with defining a work in progress limit by the help of the team. The team decides. They had created the workflow, so they are the best person to decide that what is the work in progress limit for each of the lanes of the workflow. And it's completely an empirical decision by the team. It's completely based on empiricism. But the optimization of work in progress limit is based on some rules. Like, for example, I told you, whenever someone joins the team, we decrease the work in progress limit by 1 so that they get some time, etc. And over a period of time, we see the work in progress limit. We check how it is impacting the other metrics, how the team is performing. How I mean, we use kind of many management 3.0 principles to see the happiness index of the team, how well they are doing on with agile, etc. And we try to optimize it. And so this is the way we kind of get insights. We don't really correlate that metric with the other metrics, but we use it kind of as kind of a measure on what will be the what is a good capacity of the team on that particular lane. That's all. Not the max capacity, but a good capacity.
All right, we'll go to the next point. It was not a question. Vivek Vora mentioned cycle time looks more as lead time, where Srikant replied cycle time and lead time are different. You want to give a quick insight, not in details?
Yeah, absolutely, Shrikant.
Yeah,
So,
Amit, this is Debanjan here. Yeah, my question actually, it wasn't answered. I mean, in the sense, see, because you mentioned that it is used as a metric, right? The work in progress items or the work in progress limit. So,
yeah.
so like if it is the work in progress items also, and based on the size of the team, the work in progress items might also change as a
Also change,
metric
right?
by doing a trend analysis. I mean, like, how do you gain insights? Because
Hello,
one is to get the Am I not audible?
Yeah, you are audible.
you're audible now.
Okay. I mean, like, was I not
No, no,
audible in between?
no, you are thoroughly audible. I think, Amit, have you heard the entire discussion, what the Banjan was saying? Or you want him to repeat?
No,
No,
because
can you
somebody I
please?
thought like interrupted me. Yeah, so I stopped. Okay, yeah. So what I'm saying is that the work in progress items or the work in progress limit, you say that you're using it as one of the metrics, right? So the whole
Right.
purpose of using the metrics is, or like when we introduce any metric, there should be some benefits to it, right? I mean, so you may want to look at the trend over the past few sprints. So how do you use a work in progress items or work in progress limit as a trend analyzer to know that whether the team is doing good or bad? So
Yeah. So
how is it a metric? Yeah, that is my question.
yeah. So again, like it's a metric, but it's a team level metric. So we don't usually use that for to compare teams. First of all, second is that we use suppose a team is like in the testing lane, for example. If I'm just generalizing it in the testing lane, for example, if the work in progress limit is 10, and over time it has like over 2-3 sprints it has remained 10, or like maximum increased or decreased by 1 or 2, then it means that the team is doing as it was doing. So if there is a sudden spike in work in progress limit, it means that number of stories that are coming to that
Amit, I think your voice is not coming. Amit?
is getting kind of
Yes.
clogged. so that the work in progress limit of this has increased because people are more working on that particular lane. So that's also a cue to actually inspect and adapt the other lanes of the cycle. This is second.
So Amit, I think I can take it offline with you because I lost your voice in between. So I
Yeah,
think
so let's
yeah,
park these
yeah,
questions. We can have that at the end of the session. We have couple of few more questions. So this is something what Vivek Bora talks about, cycle times and lead times. Amit, if you can just give a quick difference between cycle time and lead times, I think that will be good. Quickly, as quick as possible. Amit? Amit,
I think
are
we
you
lost
there?
him.
I can see him there.
Can you hear me, Niladri?
Yeah, I can hear you. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you talk about a quick difference between lead time and cycle time?
Yeah. So Devanjan, is your question answered or?
Yeah, so what we discussed, Amit, for the Banyan questions, we can have it a little later. We can talk about after the sessions. If you can continue for rest of the other questions, because there are a couple of other slides that you need to cover. And at the end of the session, we can talk about all the questions that we are parking now.
Yes, sure. So we use cycle time. We don't use lead time because cycle time is the end to end, like the total time taken to complete a work item. And lead time is based on sub processes with which we do not want to go into those complexity leaves time and TAKT time. We don't want to divide those time again into sub modules, etc. So we usually take the cycle time.
Okay. Again, if anyone have some other questions on the answers you have, we can let's park it. We can have that at the end of the session. I have a couple of questions from YouTube. Let's answer them because they one questions from Saurabh Sharma. He asked, the linkage of Scrum with Kanban is not clear. Would appreciate if you could be taken up with some example how through Kanban you are able to convince the value to customer.
Yeah, so we used the different, as I told, we used the different the four principles of Kanban, visualizing the workflow, limiting the work in progress, and optimizing the work in progress, actively managing the work items, and then inspecting and adapting the workflow. So by these four principles, we were able to actually fix the problem that we had, like bring in more transparency in the team so that whatever the team is doing is absolutely visible to the stakeholders. And following these four metrics, as you can see on the screen, to actually see where the team needs help and what kind of help. So yeah.
All right. Saurav also have one more questions. That is, what was the team size in each lane? Is it one Scrum team or multiple Scrum teams?
No. Each team owns its own workflow. So multiple teams, different Scrum teams doesn't have have a single workflow. Each team has its own workflow, and there's no particular lane owner. We don't have any lane owner. The entire development workflow is owned by the team, and the entire workflow is owned by the entire Scrum team along with the product owner.
All right, and finally, it's not a question. It's from Brenda Peterson. She mentioned, just to confirm, with horizontal team structure, your task switching and dependency should be reduced and not a big concern.
Yeah, but it usually involved a lot of horizontal. So that they were data scientist and engineering horizontal, the cloud horizontal, the UX UI, the developer, that is the application development, .NET and Java horizontal. So yes, there were task switching, and there was also the problem of the team not being so self-sufficient. Like there was a lot of dependencies among one another. So swarming was essential, and to get an official nod on swarming, these four metrics and visualizing the workflow and optimizing it was essential. Like that helped us actually, at least.
All right, great. So I think you can resume with your presentations. We'll take other questions at the end of the sessions.
Yeah, so we had now. I mean, we have a culture of certifications and making the team learn. So we usually we what we did was take the learning and kind of get a certification on PSK, which is a Scrum.org certification. We conducted workshops, and now we are going slowly to cover to imbibe lean startup in the teams, because that inspect and adapt cycle gets greatly enhanced and the MVP definitions get greatly enhanced through lean startup. So that was kind of the motivation for that, for these kind of workshops and certification. So in future, so along with Agile Digest, we would be having this kind of workshops. So if you can join, you can, but it's not an official like personal professional Scrum trainer workshop. It's a workshop to actually see the more, to go deep into Kanban and Scrum when joined, combined together, and like kind of validate your knowledge through the PSK exam, but not an official workshop. Yeah, that's what I wanted to mention. So yeah, so that was
So is that
all.
the last slide you had? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I think we are pretty much done. Let's have anyone have any questions they have. I don't have any questions from YouTube anymore. In chat window, I got it from Rajendra that good job, Amit. Thanks for the webinar. So if anyone have any other
So Devanjan,
questions,
I think Niladri, we can just have a 1 minute focus talk with Devanjan. So I don't know whether he has some other questions.
Hey, hi, Amit.
Okay.
Thanks for considering. Yeah, so if I can go, so yeah, so you told me about the work in progress. So that's clear to me that we are just using it as an instantaneous metric only for the teams to see that, suppose I mean, in one particular lane, I mean, in one particular activity column like testing. Okay, I mean, if it has been the same, then they've been doing this same work. But then if the WIP limit is increasing, so that part is clear to me. I had another different question which I didn't ask here yet. So you mentioned about the throughput, and you did talk about velocity also, and you did mention that. And you did mention that I'm just getting a little distracted because my daughter is crying. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah. So
Yeah, that's fine.
so yeah so yeah so what I was saying is that let me just put my thoughts. Yeah. So the throughput. So you are using story points, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So I mean, if you really go the Kanban way, then like throughput is really the number of work items which
Work
move from
items, right?
start to end, right? From start to
Right,
done.
right, right.
Right. So here, when you are measuring the throughput, are you actually measuring story points, or are you measuring the number of work items which are getting done?
We are see here also we kind of inspected and adapted. We went purely by the Scrum with Kanban guide to, because we didn't have kind of a clarity on what to consider. We initially went with Scrum on Kanban guide and we took number of work items, but then again the problem of relativity came, and we now we go with story points. How we differentiate with velocity? I got another question that like the same as you, I think, how throughput is different than velocity by Vivek. So I'll explain this. So what we use, how we use throughput is actually in a probabilistic way, that we have, every team has its own burn down rate, which is like the velocity. That is fine, but the throughput is also a culmination of the working, how many stories they have completed, the number of stories, 10, 12, whatever, and the number of story points they have completed, both. And we use that for, in every 2 sprints we calculate the SLE of the team. I didn't want to go into that. SLE is actually service level expectation. So this is like a probabilistic measure that the team gives based on the historical throughput of both the parameters, that how much confident they are, that a team is 75% confident that they can deliver 100 story points in the next 2 sprints. So to get that percentage done, along with their commitment, so we have used that to actually measure the SLE, service level expectation, for the teams. But we have not done it in a sprint level. That is like too much pressure for the team as of now. So we have done it at whenever like 2 sprints complete in 1 month, we publish the SLE so that the product owner and the other business organization knows that the team is 50% confident that they can deliver 100 story points in the next incoming sprints, something like that.
Got it. That explains. Yeah. So there is so there is a reason behind that. Else we wouldn't want to mix those two things. But as you clearly mentioned, yeah. Thanks for that. That answers my question, Amit. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Devanjan. So I just wanted to make one statement very clear that we did not do this for getting new metrics out of the team. No, we did it because we want to quickly bring on the culture of Agile. So to bring on quickly something, you need to convince, because otherwise people will not get convinced so easily on such a simple yet powerful framework as Scrum. It's difficult. So we bought Kanban. You can say we advertised complexity using Kanban so that people believe on that. So that's why I started with culture hacking. So it's one of the culture hacking you can try out. Yeah.
And I actually have one more question if we have time. So I would like to check with Niladri. So like, do we have time for one more question?
Sorry, I was in mute. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, so you did mention about the culture hack, and I keep hearing that you were trying to convince like people to believe in the power of Agile and to believe in the power of Scrum or Kanban. So here, when we're talking about trying to convince, then are we talking about the client or are we talking about the team?
No, the team was like more or less, at least in this use case, the team was more or less okay, okay and doing good in Scrum. But to make the client believe that actually things are working, because you have to be a little patient as a client, as a business, to get value out of this kind of predictive projects. It will not give you value upfront, because for example, suppose if I'm predicting sales of a particular item in an e-commerce application, then that prediction, if I predict that 200 units will be sold in next month, it doesn't mean 200 units will be sold next month. To get into that level of accuracy and precision, I need time. I need my algorithm to feed it data to actually make something valuable, get something valuable out of it. So till that time, I have to hold on to Agile. I have to hold on to my team, so that the sponsors, they don't much care about if you're doing Agile or not or whatever. So they need to see that the team is improving in terms of agility, in terms of getting values. Again, they go by numbers. You cannot easily convince them that culture is important than number. They will go by numbers. So how to make them feel that, yeah, we are giving you numbers and we are showing you numbers, which shows in turn that the team is improving. Then slowly that will help them to actually get into Agile in unconscious way, maybe. I don't know.
Right. Okay. All right. Yeah. And how did the team embrace this change? Okay, because they were working in Scrum, and then you actually start to do something Kanban, right?
Yeah. So we did it.
This would be my last question. Yeah. Yeah.
No problem. So the thing is that, like, we did it slowly. The first step was to visualize the workflow. That itself took like almost 2-3 sprints, almost a month, because every team had different workflow. There is a host of tools, mixture of processes each team was following. So visualizing the workflow and sitting with the team to kind of optimize it as much as we can at the first go, using different tools, etc., was a bit difficult. Work in progress limit was easy, because the team already had a lot of exposure in estimating, in Agile way of estimating. So they just estimated using their best guesses. And then the other things were actually validating what the team was actually doing. Like, they were swarming, but when the client manager saw like 4 people standing in a desk and doing one piece of code or one piece of visualization, I heard feedbacks, or I heard whispers that, like, what is this team doing? Like, why are 4 people at a desk every time? Something like that. So that practices which the team were already adopting got a validity from the client. Okay, now they know that, okay, swarming is a tool that the team is using for doing blah, 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 blah. So it made my life easier. I don't have to go and explain that no, they are not chatting about politics. We are actually doing something of your project only. So and I can like use some fancy term like they're actively managing the work items now through the workflow. So the other two were like the team were already doing and they fell into place. But I think the challenging part is visualizing the workflow and especially automating the parts of, then you will clearly know which part you can automate and which part you cannot. So that was, I think, the most challenging part.
Right. Thank you for that. And it was a very great like webinar. So thanks for like sharing your knowledge, Amit. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Devan. Yeah.
Right. I mean, there there were a couple of points, not the questions. One point that we have uh, from Vivek Vora mentioned thanks. From Ajay Jinkade ask PSK workshop cost. So Amit, you can connect with him separately.
I think for
Uh,
the workshop, you all can connect with Niladri or send a mail to me or Niladri in LinkedIn or whatever, and Niladri will, will right, Niladri?
right. Yeah, that we can take it offline. Yeah, Sandeep Chatterjee mentioned a nice session, Amit. Thank you. Brenda Peterson mentioned thanks, Amit. Good session. Yusuf Saik mentioned thanks, Amit. Thanks, Niladri, for the session. Sanjay Mukherjee mentioned thank you, Niladri sir, Amit, for this great webinar. All point on Scrum and Kanban were nicely covered in a limited time. Vivek Vora to everyone ask a question: how long the whole process took to stabilize?
It's. I would not say that it's stabilized. As I told you, like nothing is. If it's stable, it's predictable, right? Nothing is predictable. So it's still going on. But yeah, I mean, we are in a more. I can say that I can at least predict the one sprint from now with a little more confidence than I had in the past. So that's what I would answer here.
Okay, so I think we got the questions from Srikant. Please throw some light on early binding. You got it? Amit, are you able to hear me? Hello, Amit.
Hello, and Niladri, I'm not able to hear you properly.
Okay, the next question from Srikant is please throw some light on early binding.
Okay, so basically, so early binding is a term that is borrowed from like programming languages. So early binding is it provides compile time checking of when you check something at compile time, not like before that. So that is what early binding means, and late binding is like you allow the work with, I mean. Everything will be available before the compile time. So in this context, what early binding meant was that it means is that the team, there has to be a justification for the team to actually get the time to do the spikes, to do the release spikes, or to do the innovation spikes, etc. There has to be a justification, because after all, we all believe that we know that it's a common thought that though we know the power of agile, but we don't usually, we have time, people take time to believe it, right? So by early binding culture, what I meant was that the team uh, gets that time, or the time is justified by the business, that okay, the team will take like say 2 hours every day or 3 hours every day to actually get familiarized with the new tools, because they cannot expect our team, it cannot be expected that a team will know everything of every cloud platform to start experimenting that what's the best. That time has to be justified. So that is what is a borrowed time for early binding.
All right, so we have a final comment. A very nice session. Thanks for sharing your knowledge from Devanjan. There one more question just recently got from YouTube. Saurabh Sharma asking team size, number of members in team.
That's Scrum. Whatever you do it in Scrum, we did the same. It was like our team size is like mostly varies from between 7 and 10. So that was the size of team. So
Yeah, it's
again,
actually different guides mention different thing. If you go for your Scrum, the base Scrum, it talks 7 plus minus 2. Some Scale Agile says 3 to 11, something like that.
I think my answer to this will be that nothing is more genuine than the people who wrote Scrum, which is Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland. So go by
Yeah,
the Scrum guide in scrum.org. Rest all are fake. I mean, I am sorry to use the word fake, but it's, I mean, I don't believe in them. I mean, I
right.
think the
So,
people who
okay.
wrote has the final say. By the way, today is Jeff Sutherland's birthday.
Okay, great. Okay, Saurabh Sharma, approach taken for the session with the practical example was very good. Anil Malik mentioned note of thanks to Amit and Niladri for sharing the live experience. Anil Malik mentioned live experience of Scrum and Kanban. Okay, great. I think we all are good. Is there anything final comments anyone wants to make? Otherwise, I think it was nice talking with you, everyone, and it was a good learning experience for me as well on different aspect, different questions, and nice explanation, Amit, as well, for taking your time and talking about this particular topic. And thanks to all other participants as well for taking your valuable time on the Sunday evening, attending this webinar, and make this knowledge sharing session successful.
Thank you, Niladri, for this opportunity, and thanks everyone for joining this. Thank you.
All right. Have a wonderful day. Bye bye.